Hello everybody, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today I am live streaming a painting from a photograph. I have my Kindle in front of me, and on it I'm on the Facebook page Ranson Disciples, which I am a moderator for. And one of my buddies on the page, Colin Woodward, who is a great painter. I had it just brought up and I searched his name on the page. He's been doing some fantastic watercolors lately. Well, since I first started talking to him maybe 2 years ago at this point. But once in a while he posts photos to share for people to paint from. And there's other people that do that as well. And of course there's other Facebook pages where people share photos to paint from. But I wanted to pick one of Colin's photographs and paint it live. So it can be found on the Ron Ranson Facebook page, and from there you would just search his name and you would come down. And I'll talk to Colin, see if there's any other way I could kind of link to it or something like that. So that being said, I'm filming this live on Twitch, so there'll be kind of some blow drying issues, things like that. Some stuff on the side, just kind of having fun. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. So in front of me I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. I'm trying to get my other Kindle up and loaded. Sometimes it wants to work, sometimes it doesn't. It's one of those Kindle the 7s. My mother had bought it for me for Christmas a few years ago, and it's been super helpful, especially with these live streams and all that. So thank you, Mom. Just sometimes the Twitch app gives trouble, which is the live stream. So the quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua, I'm saturating that. It's 140 pound cold press, 100% cotton. And while we paint that, I don't know what today's kind of side conversation will be. Usually people will jump into the live chat and then things will just start happening. But me and the moderators of the Ron Ranson page, the admins and all that, we were just talking about like different things in our videos, because they do videos as well, and we were talking about different ethical approaches to teaching a medium, or kind of just chronicling our process as opposed to teaching the medium, etc. So that was an interesting conversation. I think that I'm of the camp, the idea that as long as you are using light, fast materials and archival materials, and maybe displaying it under glass, then you're fine. I think that sums it up. I'm not going to go into depth with that whole conversation. It was a really interesting one, and I think that it'd be fun to eventually kind of do a podcast or something with them. Anyway, so let's get started. I'm mixing up some raw sienna and ultramarine for this kind of grayish sky. I've been finding that my ultramarine with my earth tones, I'll go for my grays to get that, and then I'll use phthalo blue with my earth tones for my more greens. And I think that'll be the main focus of this painting. Just that back and forth between those two. Just bring that down. I have a lot of fun art supplies that I need to do some videos on. I just haven't gotten around to that. Let's grab some phthalo blue. why I brought that up. Not quite sure, but I'm just thinking of other videos that I want to maybe try to get done tonight. I'm going to do phthalo blue and burnt umber. I'm going to jump right into my dark. I'll start mapping out this scene. And when I do this, I'm flattening out the paper. So phthalo blue and burnt umber. Using this to map out that far distance. It's wet and wet, so all these marks are going to soften up. And then we'll come back over it and get a contrast with it. When we go back over it, when it's dry, I'll talk about one of the things that me and Joe were discussing. I don't want to talk about it from the standpoint of what each of our beliefs or ideas were in regards to it, because I don't want to put any, ideas to paper just yet. This is an interesting concept, and it's really something that I think we really need to explore and discuss. Okay, so I kind of mapped out everything from here. We'll try to get some more life into it. Let's do some raw sienna into this ultramarine mix. Sorry, phthalo blue mix. I'm not going to pass over the exact marks. This is just so we get a little bit of variation between the two. I think we could actually jump and play with the rigger in a few moments, just to do some background tree structures as well. These areas are going to be darker. I'm just kind of prepping them for that. Let's see, we're even going to have a tree that winds up coming pretty predominantly right here, so I'm going to give it a little bit of soft foliage to begin with. And the little bridge is going to come through here, here, and here, just to get some sort of idea. It's going to be dark down below, and there's going to be a house back in here that I'm going to scrape out. Now, I'm thinking we should grab some lemon yellow. Try to get some fresh greenery in this. That's Percy barging her way through. Okay. This might actually be a good time to introduce what we were talking about, just art-wise, on our side conversation that I was mentioning earlier, that I was alluding to. Using watercolor thickly, like straight from the tube, essentially. There's an effect, and he had found the name for it. It's referred to as bronzing. I'd never heard that term. I think I had read the article, but I just didn't recall the term. And it has to do when thick, heavy paint, watercolor, dries to a shiny, leathery, weird texture because of how thick it is. And we were discussing the merits of that and how it might be viewed in the art world and all that. And there was just a very interesting conversation came out of that. So rather than going into detail about what we had thought in our conversation, I'm curious what you all think in regards to that. I might eventually get to a point where I can apply paint in such a manner on this painting, and then I'll see what you all think, so I can explain what I'm talking about better, just in case you're not sure what I mean. So this is lemon yellow mixed into that. And I said that we can introduce the rigger, so we shall. This is for far distant softening effects. Going wet and wet. This is going to dry, light, and soft. You have to be careful with the quantity of water on the brush. From there, you could potentially just have kind of like a cauliflower line effects, which has interesting value in and of itself, where you can use it to actually do kind of like a lifting at this stage. In fact, I don't know how well you could see it, but it did it right there and right there. I'm not too concerned with what patterns that I'm doing in this far distant background. It's just with watercolor, for me, my mentality is that it's enough that I'm doing it, and it will give an overall feel to the painting. I try to work the whole painting at once, mainly since it's constantly drying, and for me, if I do one area in depth and then the painting dries, I don't get kind of a uniformity throughout. So I'm just trying to be aware of that. Okay, I have a lot of green on here right now. Let's grab some burnt sienna, just to kind of mute it. I might scrape out the bridge in a bit just to start planning that out. First, let me get a little bit more darks. This is Payne's Gray. This is the shadows in the water, the reflections. The bottom of that bridge is going to come here, over, down. We have that house that sits back in here. I'm going to darken that area. So I'm kind of putting pigment in. This is just burnt umber and Payne's gray, so that I have something that I can scrape out of to get that building in the background. You probably see that it's starting to dry now, so we're not getting a diffusion in some areas. So I'm going to take a card. I'm going to use that to scrape out this house back here. I'm just going to go down with it. And a little bit. Kind of catching that side of the building. Then scrape out down here its reflection. Let's switch to the number 4 rigger, so I could lay some thicker tree elements in. It's a little bit damp back here, so this will dry even softer than it is. And that'll give a good depth effect to it. Let's see if we can start bringing this guy in. When I was first starting out with trees, one of the big mistakes that I would make is I wouldn't paint all the way to the top of the page. So paint to the sides to make sure that you are, when you cover it with a mat, that it gets covered. The bridge, I'm not really scraping for final effect, just scraping so I can get an idea of where everything's going to sit. It's a little dry right here. So I can light it up. There we go. It's right there. It's got its pillar. And then there's going to be a dark pillar back here. Comes into the painting. So perspective wise, it's going to have to recede down a little bit. And it comes to about here. Piling. Then it's going to go down. And we have all those fun posts, which we'll play around with the rigger. But now that kind of helps me set the stage for what's going on there. I'll build up some foliage behind it. Stretch that out. We could, well, since we're scraping, also start scraping these. I really wish I knew the names of the different types of plants and weeds and trees, just so I can name them whenever I was painting. I downloaded an app on my phone that's supposed to help identify different things, but honestly I have no idea how efficient it is. A big old oak tree in the backyard, and then we rent a house, and that big old oak tree, can't get a straight answer if it's what's called a live oak or a water oak. And I think some people will know the difference. Other people probably say, why would you care? The reason I care is that one of them is very prone to falling during hurricanes, while the other is not. We had started getting vaccinated, so my parents were able to come for Easter. And when we were saying goodbye, my dad was looking at the oak tree between the house that we rent and the neighbor's house, my friends, and he's like, that is, or maybe he was pointing to the power line. Either one, he was saying, oh, that's dangerous, that's dangerous. I'm like, Dad, come on, that's the last thing I need to hear right now. And my mom, who watches all these videos, my dad watches them too. Hopefully they both get a chuckle out of that. All right, I'm getting a darker mix here now. This is the phthalo blue and the burnt umber. The number 4 rigger, you can see the variation of line that we get. This is Silver Black Velvet brand, which I'm not sure if it's synthetic squirrel or partial synthetic, partial squirrel, but I find that's a really good brand. I have a few brushes in it. Somebody had posted on one of the art pages a reply that they had gotten from Silver Black Velvet where they were made. Some people were apparently concerned about the location that they were made in, if it was a knockoff or not, if it was made in a different location. And from what I had saw is that they are made in like Singapore or Sri Lanka or something. You have to check that out. I didn't realize that was a thing. Knockoff brushes. But this brush is, for me, a convenience brush. Even more convenient than the number 1 rigger. Reason being is that it holds a lot more than the number 1 does. So that's super convenient. This is the dark shadow of the bridge, dark underhang on the handrail. Start playing with just dark lines for posts on the railing. I'm not measuring anything out. Just kind of putting those in, and then we'll play around with it from there. Kind of just going more for the illusion of it than actually painting a bridge. Using the side of this rigger, kind of getting some dry brush, different textured effects in there. We could switch to the number 1 if we want to play around with some finer details of twigs and branches. There are a lot prevalent in this scene. By the way, I mentioned once again, this is a photograph by Colin Woodward, one of the painters on the Ron Ranson Disciples Facebook page. And he is from the United Kingdom, I believe. And he, yes, this would be United Kingdom. He posted it end of March, let's say. So I guess that's what it looks like this time of year there. For us down in Louisiana, it was 79 degrees Fahrenheit today. Yes, just to make some of y'all jealous. But once it gets super hot down here, I'm going to be jealous of y'all. I believe I'm going to order not a Camelback, but kind of hydration pack type thing. Kind of those ones that people that are using when they do trail running and stuff, but for the skateboarding. Just because it's just completely irresponsible to go out in the summer weather in Louisiana without hydration. I'm going to put some dark marks around that. A little bit of texture back on that, kind of the shore back here. And I'll bring some shadow down from the bridge, reflection shadow. I'm not trying to do it perfect. If you do it perfect, it's going to look, I don't know. If you try to do something perfect, it winds up not looking perfect unless you're like really, really good. And I'm not good. So that's why I do the illusion marks. There's a little bit of raw sienna. Now, to go back to what I was alluding to earlier in the painting, that conversation with Joe, we were talking about something called bronzing. And I noticed that I had done it quite a bit with my raw sienna. I'll see if I can get an example of it happening here, but honestly, it's so wet that I don't think it'll happen. It might have to happen in the very, very last stages of the painting. Areas here are wet and wet, so I'll just let that diffusion happen. You might even use the hake for a texture as well. Some Payne's gray for the further one. This area dried a little bit lighter. So I'll play around with Payne's gray, and that'll give some textured effects and variety in there. Okay, got to continue moving around the painting. Payne's Gray. Attempting to kind of blur the shadow reflection on the right side of the painting into the land itself, just to create an area where the eye wouldn't rest, where the eye would kind of stop from going off the page, but it would then come back into the painting with other devices. This is a mixture of just the Payne's Gray, and I could grab burnt umber for this. Darkening the corners, that's just kind of a little device I use to prevent the eyes from going off the page there. A little bit of texture with the dry brush there. I'm going to come back in with different colors though. Darkening back here. I'm going to have to start doing foliage in a moment. Like tree foliage. I kind of like the low ground foliage. We'd used scraping earlier, which we can use here. That adds a little bit of liveliness to it. Okay, some lemon yellow into this mix. You'll see how this kind of contrasts against the softer background, creating depth. I'm stamping in this fashion, so I got to make sure it's not a repetitive mark. So I found just the best way is just to rotate the brush between my fingertips. Some people are really good at this. The foliage texture with the hake. I haven't mentioned in a while David Usher. If you haven't checked him out on YouTube, check him out. Okay, let's grab some more of that green. This is for, I referred to it the other day with what we call it down here in Louisiana, kind of that algae growth plants. We call it duckweed. I'm sure it could just be like lilies or other type of things, but here there seems to be a little bit of that on the water in this painting. A lot of branches and twigs. I might paint some in, but I'm having fun just scraping them out. These even little flower buds starting on them. Then with a painting like this, you could say, okay, I'm done at this point. You can continue to tickle it for a bit. I do find when I do a live stream, I put maybe an extra, I don't know, let's say 10 minutes of effort into a painting. And then at that point, I call myself done. And I find that those extra 10 minutes really do help with the overall painting. I don't feel like they're too overworked. So I'm going to allow myself that in this one just to see. Here's some burnt umber, just dry brushed up. We haven't done any dry off whatsoever which is good. I don't like doing that during a live stream because I can't pause the camera. There is a tree coming out of the water right here, or kind of like a bush. You can leave stuff out, obviously. Ron Ranson had a book out. It's still out. I just say had because he's deceased. There's a book by Ron Ranson called Distilling the Scene. I don't own that, but it's in reference to taking a photograph and breaking it down into its components. I think Zoltan Szabo, who is also deceased, had a book like that as well, where he had broken things down into from photographs into smaller elements. I guess what I'm saying is, you don't need to put everything in that you see, but I figured this one might help create a little depth in this spot right here. I'm thinking I'm going to do a dry off just so we can see what is happening, taking place with everything. Just putting in some branches in, drawing them in. Payne's gray underneath that hand railing. Just get that extra little bit of dark there. This spot should be dry, so I'll paint a little door on that house. Okay, so if you have your earbuds on, watch your ears. I'm going to do a dry off. So I'm gonna tickle it a little bit with the rigger and maybe with the hake for some foliage texture while I kind of do my signing off speech. First and foremost, please like, follow, and subscribe. It really helps this channel grow, and I just really enjoy filming this and talking and whatnot. And if you ever have any questions or concerns, or if you want me to ever cover a topic, let me know in the comments. If you ever want to financially support this channel, I have links to the Patreon down below, and I try to do exclusive stuff for the Patreon, and I also try to have to address any questions, comments, concerns that are raised by the Patreon. If there's anything they want me to paint. If it's something that I'm capable of doing, or at least I could discuss it. That being said, I mentioned the Ron Ranson Facebook page that I'm a part of, and that's for fast and loose painters in this style. We also have other people on there that do videos in fast and loose, and they have their different approaches. For example, Lois Davidson, Joe Menza, David Usher, just to name a few. Also, this was from a photograph by Colin Woodward. I'm going to put that in the title, so I'll let him know. So his photo that he uploaded was on that site, and I'll see if he'll let me upload it to the Patreon so you guys can access it. from there, I felt like there's other stuff I need to talk about. Oh yeah. There's a few shout outs to a few other Facebook pages that are really good groups. There is Watercolors Beginner and Beyond. They've been a really receptive group. Rick S. I always say Rick S because I can't pronounce his last name. He has an amazing YouTube channel and tons of fantastic painting tutorials. And he also has a Facebook page, Friends of Rick S. And people share their works there. I'd recommend checking it out. One last page to mention would be the Watercolor Tips and Techniques. That page has been very helpful and has very friendly people on it. For example, when I was exploring, and I still am, the Watercolor Ground by Daniel Smith, a lot of people had awesome feedback and advice. So that's a really good group to check out. There's also some new groups popping up, like painting tutorials or watercolor tutorial videos named along those lines. And it was really cool seeing other people share my tutorials on there. And that, I don't know, it made me feel really good. And they've also been sharing, other people's tutorials, and it's really cool stuff. So it's a good resource. So there's probably not a better time in the history of the world to be a painter and to be learning. So check all that out. How was that for a sign off? Was that a good one? Now that I'm standing up, I'm looking at it. Let's do a little bit of hake at the very end. I didn't get that effect that I wanted to talk about, the bronzing, so I'm gonna have to probably dedicate a video to trying to get that technique and talking about it. It's not really a desirable effect, but I think it'd be fun to talk about it. On that note, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day. Bye.